Wait before you buy Screamer. Now, I know that's probably not what you expected to hear about a game that looks this bold, this different, this confident in a genre that's honestly been playing it safe lately. Because on the surface, Screamer feels like exactly what arcade racing fans have been asking for. Something stylish, something fresh, something that isn't just another realistic track racer chasing perfect lap times. But here's the thing. Screamer might be one of the most creative racers in years, and still not be something you should jump into right away. So you are probably asking, what exactly is Screamer? At its core, this is an arcade racer, but not in the way you're probably used to. It's developed with a clear vision. Step away from realism and build something that feels more like a hybrid between a racing game, an anime series, and even a fighting game. So instead of licensed cars and real-world tracks, you've got a futuristic setting, a cast of characters from all over the world, and a heavy emphasis on team rivalries and narrative. The story isn't just background flavor either, it's front and center. You're not just picking a car and racing, you're stepping into a larger world where teams clash, personalities matter, and everything is framed with this visual novel-style presentation. And honestly, that's one of the first things that makes Screamer stand out. This isn't a game trying to simulate reality, it's trying to create its own identity. The races themselves are fast, chaotic, and layered with mechanics that go way beyond just accelerating, braking, and drifting. There's a system built around something called the Echo device, which introduces resources like sync and entropy. These aren't just passive stats. You are actively building and spending them mid-race through things like slipstreaming, timing, and aggressive play. So, right away, you can tell this isn't just about driving clean laps. It's about managing systems, making decisions, and almost fighting your opponents in a way that feels closer to a combat game than a traditional racer. And that ambition, trust me, it is everywhere in Screamer. Let's start with the positives, because there's a lot here to like. And in some areas, Screamer genuinely feels like a breath of fresh air. Now, first off, the identity of this game is strong. From the moment you start, it commits fully to this anime-inspired stylized world. The characters, the UI, the tone, it all feels cohesive. It's not dipping its toes into these influences. It's fully embracing them. The cast is one of the more interesting parts. You've got characters from all over the world. Just to name a few, there's Spain, Brazil, India, South Africa, which I'm honestly stoked about, and Germany. And while the voice acting isn't always the strongest, there's something genuinely cool about seeing that kind of diversity in a racing game. It gives the world a sense of scale and personality that most racers just don't even try to achieve. And even if the performances can be hit or miss, the effort to make each team feel distinct is clear. You're not just racing faceless opponents, you're racing characters with their own styles and identities. Then there's the presentation of the story itself. It leans into that visual novel style, and while there aren't a ton of cutscenes, the ones that are there are actually really well done. They're polished, nicely animated, and they give the game a level of cinematic quality that you don't usually associate with this genre. Now, the story itself, we'll talk about that more in a bit. But in terms of how it's presented, there's a lot to appreciate. Where Screamer really starts to get interesting though, is in its systems. That Echo device I mentioned earlier is probably the most unique part of the game. Instead of just racing, you're constantly building up sync and entropy through your actions. Slipstream behind opponents, time things well, stay aggressive, and you're rewarded with resources that you can then spend for advantages. It adds this extra layer where races aren't just about being the fastest. They're about playing smart. There's a rhythm to it though. You're thinking about positioning, timing, resource management all at once. And in a weird way, it almost feels like a fighting game layered on top of a racer. You're not just trying to win, you're trying to outplay your opponents. On top of that, the racing itself is surprisingly diverse. There's a lot going on at any given moment. Gear shifting, managing your eco resources, focusing on the track, interacting with other racers. It creates this very dynamic experience where no two races feel exactly the same. Customization and overall variety also help keep things engaging. There's enough here to make you want to keep playing, to experiment, to see what else the game has to offer. So, when you step back and look at it, Screamer is doing a lot right. I mean, it's creative, it's bold, it's trying new things in a genre that desperately needs new ideas. But now, this is where we obviously get to the problems. For all the things Screamer does well, there's one issue that's really hard to ignore. And unfortunately, it's a big one: the driving itself. Now, this might obviously sound strange, especially after everything I just said about how dynamic and diverse the racing feels. But the actual control of the car is where things start to fall apart. Screamer uses a twin-stick control scheme where steering and drifting are split across two sticks. Now, on paper, that might sound like an interesting idea. I mean, it's something different, something that could add depth. In practice, it honestly feels extremely awkward. Even after a decent amount of time with the game, it never really clicks in the way you want it to. There's a lack of intuitiveness to it. Instead of feeling like you're in control of the car, it often feels like you're fighting the controls. And that's obviously a huge issue for a racing game, because no matter how good your systems are, no matter how interesting your mechanics are, if the core act of driving doesn't feel satisfying, it's always going to hold the experience back. What makes it even more frustrating is that you can see what the game is trying to do. There is depth here, there's intention behind these mechanics, but the execution just doesn't quite land. Winning races often ends up feeling less about mastering the track or perfecting your racing lines, and more about how well you're managing boosts and abilities. It shifts the focus away from driving skill and more toward system management. And for some players, that might actually be more appealing. But for a lot of people, it's obviously going to feel off. Then there's the issue of information overload. Screamer asks a lot from you at once. You're shifting gears, watching your resources, focusing on the track, and also dealing with other racers. It can get overwhelming pretty quick. Instead of everything coming together smoothly, it sometimes feels like the game is pulling your attention in too many directions at the same time. And when you combine that with controls that already feel intuitive, it can lead to moments where you're not losing because you made a mistake. You're losing because the game just didn't feel clear. Now, let's move on to the story. While the presentation is strong, the actual narrative can feel a bit convoluted and drawn out. It's trying to do a lot, and not all of it lands. There are moments where it drags, where it feels like it's overcomplicating things instead of pulling you in. So even though the idea of having a story-driven racing game is exciting, and honestly, something more games should try, the execution here doesn't fully live up to the ambition. And that kind of sums up Screamer as a whole. It's ambitious, it's creative, but it doesn't always stick the landing. So, who is Screamer actually for? If you're someone who's tired of traditional racing games, if you're bored of realism, bored of the same track-focused experiences, and you just want something that feels different, something with personality, something that's willing to take risks, there's a lot here that you might genuinely love. If you're into anime-style storytelling, character-driven games, or even systems-heavy gameplay that feels closer to a fighting game than a racer, Screamer is going to stand out in a way that very few racing games do. And if you're the kind of player who enjoys learning complex systems, adapting to unconventional controls, and figuring out how everything fits together, you might actually get a lot out of it. But if you're someone who values tight, responsive driving, if the feel of the car is the most important part of a racing game for you, this is where you might struggle. Because no matter how interesting everything else is, that core experience is always going to matter most. And right now, that's the part of Screamer that feels the least refined. So, should you buy Screamer right now? Honestly, I'd say wait. Not because it's a bad game. I mean, it's not a bad game. In fact, there's a lot here that's genuinely impressive. But this feels like a game that could really benefit from time. Whether that's updates, balance changes, or even just giving the community time to figure out how these systems are meant to be played at their best. Right now, it feels like an incredible concept that hasn't fully come together yet. And for most players, that's not something you want to jump into at full price. Screamer is one of those games that's easy to respect. It takes risks, it tries new things, it pushes a genre that's been stuck in its ways for a very long time. And honestly, we need more games like that. But at the same time, it's also a reminder that ambition alone is never enough. Execution matters, and in a racing game, the feel of driving is everything. So yeah, in my opinion, this is a wait. But it is a hopeful wait. Because if Screamer can refine what's already here, it could turn into something really, really special. Let me know what you guys think. Have you played Screamer yet? Or are you planning to pick it up later? And do you think games like this are the future of racing, or is this one a bit too experimental? If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and stick around for more videos right here on Controller Culture. And as always guys, I'll see you all in the next one.